welcome back to the Daily Ebenezer. I hope you guys are doing great today. Today we're going to be talking about developing high-performing volunteers. Now, before we get started, be sure to download your note pages for this session. You can find those in the comment section of your video or for your podcast, or you can check out our website at thedailyebenezer.com and find them there. So today I want to spend a little time just talking to you guys about how can we develop high-performing volunteers. Now, most of us are involved in some kind of volunteer work throughout our life, and a lot of us are involved in a leadership position. You know, it can be anything from church or religious organizations to organizations with our kids' school or extracurricular activities. And then there's a lot of organizations that we're just passionate about. They stand for something we believe in, and we want to help others and make an impact on other people. So how can we work in those organizations and develop high-performing volunteers so we can be successful with that organization? Well, first of all, I like this quote by Sherry Anderson. It says, volunteers don't get paid, not because they're worthless, but because they're priceless. And so I want you guys to start thinking about that and think about the price that we would pay as an organization if we had to pay every person that volunteered for organization for everything they did. Most of our organizations couldn't function. We couldn't afford that. So look at your volunteers as they're really priceless. What they bring to our organization allows us to make a difference in people's lives, change people's lives, and be successful because of what our volunteers bring to us. So there's a very important reasons for developing volunteers. And when I talk about developing volunteers, is when we bring volunteers into our organization, we need to look at them and say, well, hey, how can we develop them? And what's the reason behind developing them? And I want to give you guys a few of those reasons here. Number one, we need to understand that volunteers join the organizations because they believe in us. You know, they believe in our cause and what we're trying to accomplish. And unlike paid employees, volunteers have a desire to share their times and their talents and gifts with organizations to help the organization to be more successful and to impact the lives of others. And so we need to be willing to take those skills and times and talents and develop them into the most that they can be, not only just for our organization, but also to help that person be the most they can be and to make a bigger impact on the world. Organizations and team leaders have to be willing to develop volunteers in order to achieve the greatest results for the organizations. A lot of times people have the passion, but they may not have that skill set yet, and we need to be willing to develop that. Talking about passion, passion is the number one most valuable asset for any organization, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is because you can teach skill, we can teach leadership, we can teach people how to do just about everything, but you cannot teach passion. Passion is something that people either have or they don't have, but it's the most valuable asset, because if you can have a team of volunteers in your organization that are passionate about your organization and what the goals are of your organization, you can make a change for the best, no matter what the situation is. So always look for that passion. You know, don't worry about the skill so much, but look for the passion, because we can teach skill. So how can we develop high-performing volunteers? As a team leader or organization leader, what can you do to develop those high-performing volunteers? Number one, we're going to talk about 5 stages of volunteer growth and what we can do to maximize those stages. Every volunteer will go through these 5 stages. Now, some people don't make it all the way through all 5 stages. It just depends on how much time they're involved in the organization and what they want to do. But we'll talk about those here in a moment. Second of all, it's really important that we're prepared and organized, okay? People are giving of their time and talents, and we need to be ready for that, okay? If we're not prepared and organized, then we're wasting their time, and they're not going to stick around very long. It's really important that we get volunteers plugged in really soon, because people are volunteering for our organizations. They're volunteered to be a part of it, and if we don't get them in our organization, get them plugged in and give them something to do, then eventually they're going to say, well, they really don't need me, so I'll find something else to do with my time. And that's really important, because a lot of organizations lose volunteers just simply because they don't get them plugged in. And then last of all, the most important thing we can do as we begin to develop high-performing volunteers is just lead by the example. And you know, become a servant leader, lead people the way that we want them to perform, okay? And if we get in there with them and we show them that we're passionate about the organization and we're passionate about them being successful and we need them, then that's going to make a really big impact on their lives and how they set up for success with our organizations. All right, so let's talk about the 5 stages of volunteer development. The first stage is developing a relationship, and this is part of every organization, doesn't matter what kind of organization you're in, but it's really important that you take time to develop a relationship with every volunteer. Okay, now if you're a team leader, you're going to develop relationships with your particular team. If you're executive of the organization, you may not touch every person, but it's important that you develop relationships with the people that you work with on a daily basis at that organization. First of all, let's get prepared and organized. That's the most important thing, because if people show up to our organization and we're prepared and we're organized, and we can, really show them where we're going with the organization, what we want them to do, how they can get involved, it's going to really help them believe in our organization and get involved. If they show up and we don't really know where we're going, what we're doing, or how they can get involved, then they're not going to stick around. Be sure to take time to personally welcome people to the organization and talk to them about the organization and the team. That personal connection is one of the most powerful tools that you're going to have as a volunteer leader, because people want to be part of something, and in order to make them part of something, we've got to build a connection with that person. Make sure you clearly communicate the vision, okay? People need to know what they're believing in. They need to know what they're going to be part of, and it's really important that you take time to communicate that with them. Now, I always believe in providing a clear and a written job description of what that volunteer is interested in or where they want to volunteer. It's really important in a volunteer organization that people understand what they're going to be doing or what we would like to expect from them. Because a lot of times people are volunteering for an organization or something that they believe in, but they may not totally understand. They may not understand the job that they need to do or how to do that job or what the expectations are. So always give them something in writing and explain it to them. Take time to talk to them about that job description and find out what their passions are and what their skill sets are and their talents are and how they can help the organization, and then try to find a way to put that person in a position where they're going to be really good at. But the next thing is when you're building that relationship, you've got to have passion. Okay, you got to be passionate about your team. You got to be passionate about your organization. You got to be passionate about the volunteer. If you show up and you have no passion about any of those, then you can forget it, because you're not going to get that person hooked. You're not going to get that person hooked on the organization and believing in the organization, because if we're not passionate, we're never going to be able to expect them to be passionate. So number one is developing that relationship. Developing the relationship with our new volunteers is the key first stage. All right, that takes us into stage number 2, and that's assimilation, or getting that volunteer plugged into our organization. First of all, it's really important that you think about it and how you relate to that person. Always be kind and respectful at all times. If we were paying these people, then we can be a little bit more hard and demanding of them and things like that. But on a volunteer organization, we really have to be kind and respectful. Okay, we need to make sure that we approach everything, even in critical times, even when we need them to perform, that we're kind and respectful at all times. Because if we approach them in the wrong way and we get them upset and they leave, then we didn't accomplish anything. Be knowledgeable and respectful of their time. If we got people that are volunteering their time, we don't want to set 5 meetings in 5 days, okay? Because we're asking people to take time off from their job, their family, their social life, their other organizations to give to our organization. And so we want to be respectful of that. So when you're developing and getting people plugged in, always be respectful of their time and understand their time and what other demands they have in their life. Make sure you start them off sort of small and give them a task and let them see how they enjoy it, see what they're good at, see, if it works for them, and give them the opportunity to back out if they don't enjoy that. Always keep their workload manageable. Don't try to put too much on somebody. And then as they get going and doing stuff, sort of just talk to them and see how they're handling that workload. They may can handle more. They may need to back off a little bit, and being aware of that is really important. Always make sure at the beginning of this relationship that the volunteer knows they can say no at any time. Okay, if they get into something and it's more than they can handle, or they're not happy about it, or they don't enjoy it, make sure they can always say no and back out, and you can find them another place. Because if we don't set that precedence up front, then what's going to happen is they're going to burn out, or they're going to be really unhappy, and they're going to leave the organization. But if we let them know up front, say, look, if you ever feel, that, you don't really like this job, or you've got too much going on, just let us know. We'll be glad to, find you another place to serve, or give you some time off, or whatever it is. It makes a huge difference. And then last of all, be sure to respond to input, questions, and feedback as soon as possible. This really makes a big difference. It lets the people know that they're important enough to you that you're willing to respond to them and not leave them holding on that. All right, guys, that takes us to stage number 3, and that's developing the volunteer strengths and passions. And this is where they've been in the organization for a while, they've been doing a job or two, and they're starting to understand and get the heartbeat of the organization, and we want to help them to develop their strengths and their passions and use them in those ways. We need to create a trusting environment that's got open communication. People need to know that, hey, they can talk to us, they can be real with us, and they can trust us with what they want to do and accomplish for the organization. And it's really important that we don't belittle them. And somebody comes in and say, hey, I've got an idea. Don't shut that down immediately. Even if it's not a really good idea, listen to it and then give some input on it. Even if we have to change their idea or not use it, by showing them that it's open and you're always there to listen, it's going to make a huge difference. Make sure as a leader that you always honor that commitment. Okay, whatever the commitment is, if you can't make that commitment, make sure you communicate that as soon as possible, but don't back out, don't not show up, don't be late. That's really, really important, because you're setting the tempo for your team and your organization for these volunteers. So always try to honor those commitments. Always acknowledge success, and don't overlook those small wins. Those small wins may be the biggest thing of getting that volunteer team or that volunteer from just successful to really high performing. Because if they think that the small things are important to you and you're going to celebrate those with them, they're going to get to the bigger things for you. That makes a huge difference. Be willing to give and receive feedback, and once again, be kind and respectful with it, but feedback is always a gift. And so we need to get it and we need to use it, but also be willing to give feedback in a positive way and help people be better. The truth is, in volunteer organizations, a lot of the volunteers, they want to be the best they can for that organization. And if we approach them in the right way and give them some feedback to help them be more successful, they're going to appreciate that. Be sure to communicate progress regularly, how things are going, where we're going, how we're going to get there, or maybe things didn't work out, what changes we're going to make. Be willing to learn from setbacks and failures. And this is important, because if we fail at something as a team or as an organization, we don't need to just focus on that and how bad and awful it is, but say, hey, what can we learn from this? And let's start and use it as a stepping stone. That's really, really important. Is the way we see failures is the way the volunteers are going to approach that. And it's important that we see it in a positive way and a way that we can learn and get better from it. And then always be willing to communicate team and organization needs to the volunteers. This is something that's important, and something that I learned running several organizations, is that, a lot of times there's always great need in organizations. There's always something you need. We don't always have everything we need, but take time, once a quarter to communicate that with your volunteers, because what I found is when we got to some really critical points at a couple of organizations and we were struggling, I didn't think the volunteers really cared. But what I came to find out after I finally communicated those needs to them is people just didn't know about them. They didn't understand the needs. And once those needs were presented to them, they answered above and beyond what we needed. And it was amazing to see. So always be willing to communicate the needs of your organizations to your volunteers. All right, that takes us to our stage number 4, which is, I think, one of the biggest steps, and that's the grow and empower volunteers. So they've been part of the organizations. We've been developing them, helping them be successful and be stronger volunteers and people in life. And now we want to figure out a way, how can we grow and empower that person? What can we do for that? First of all, we need to learn to provide opportunities for the volunteers to grow and learn. So not just opportunities to necessarily serve the organization and do things for us, but what can we do to help them be better? Not just so our organization could be better, but for them to be better in life, to be better in person, to be better success. And so find ways and provide opportunities for all your volunteers to have that opportunity to grow and learn. Make sure volunteers are enjoying their position, okay? If you've got a volunteer that's got a lot of potential, but they're not happy in their position, it's going to be hard to get them to grow and empower them to be better, okay? So make sure you got them in a place that they're passionate about and they really enjoy working. And give them opportunities to take a break. If we got volunteers that's with us for a long time, sometimes they just need to take a break. Sometimes a 1 month, a 3 month break from the organization or from volunteering will bring whole new life to that person. When they come back, they're going to outperform anything they've ever done. Be sure to provide opportunities for them to switch roles. Maybe they've been in this role for a long time and it's time for them to try something different, or maybe they're getting a little burnout and they need to move to something different. And so be sure to give them that opportunity. And then find ways to help your volunteers to be successful. Okay. If they need some skills on, working technology or learning how to use technology, make sure you provide that opportunity. Find out what they're passionate about, find out what they want to be better at, and then find out a way to help them be better at those things. All right, that takes us to our last stage, stage number 5. Stage number 5 is all about mentoring volunteers for leadership roles. And so we've had this volunteer that's been involved and they've been growing and they're excited and they're passionate, and it's time to start taking them from just the volunteer role to a leadership role. And this is real important for any organization, because we always want to be building and developing new leaders, because as we grow, we're going to need new leaders. The life cycle of an organization tells us that, leaders are going to come and go, and people are going to be involved, and then they'll get out of involvement with the organization. So it's really critical that we begin to mentor and develop volunteers for leadership roles when they're ready for it. We do that through these steps. First of all, make sure that at this point in the volunteer's life cycle with the organization that you're taking time for interpersonal time with them at events and meetings and stuff. Get to know them, get to know their family life, get to know their personal, goals in life, what's important to them, what they enjoy doing. This really makes a big difference on how to develop them as a leader, is getting to know a person, outside the organization, what's important, what are they passionate about, and that's really going to help you help develop them into leadership. Be personable and real with them when you're doing a mentoring relationship and begin to develop them. Be transparent. Hey, be real with people. Say, look, I really had a hard time with this, or I struggled with this, or I wasn't really good at this. Share your real life experiences. People react to real life experiences. They don't always react to the, organization structure and the policy and procedure manual, but when you sit down and share your experience with them and your personal life experiences with them and what you've learned through your growth and leadership, then people get excited about it and they want to know more and they get involved. Teach leaders how to develop people skills and how to properly communicate even when they're stressed. And this is really important, because one of the hardest things for most people is developing the right set of people skills and learning how to communicate with people properly. And this is really important, because you can have somebody that's got amazing talent and amazing skill and amazing passion for the organization, and they're great and wonderful, but you put them in a leadership position and they're not able to communicate with those people correctly, and it creates all kind of turmoil and problems for your organization. Take the time to invest in that person. Take the time to mentor them and teach them people skills and how to correctly listen to people and how to correctly communicate people. And especially when things are stressful, because when we get stressed, we sort of let everything fall by the wayside and our true self comes out. And a lot of times we can hurt people's feelings. We can upset people. We can make people mad. They leave the organization. So this is a really important set as a mentor to develop in a potential leader, is those personal people skills and communication skills. Next thing, you need to teach people how to delegate. And this is really important, because when we take somebody a lot of times from a volunteer and make them into a leader, they still have that mentality they need to handle everything. And it's really important that as a leader, we teach them how to delegate tasks to the people under them to be successful. Make sure you teach servant leadership. Every volunteer leader needs to understand the importance of servant leadership and how it works, and the importance of using that model when we lead other people. Guide them through the leadership functions of the organizations that you want them to be responsible for. Let them do things, teach them how to do it correctly, and be there with them and just sort of be a guide for a while. And then when you're comfortable with them and you think they've got the right skill set, then enable them to lead on their own and let them lead. And this is a hard part for us sometimes, especially as a mentor, is to let them go and do their own thing. Now, you still want to verify and be able to trust them with the job and make sure it's getting done correctly, but don't overpower them or overanalyze them. Allow them to lead and do their best job. All right, guys, I want to share this last quote with you here, and this is a great one by Elizabeth Andrews. It says, volunteers don't necessarily have the time, they just have the heart. And that sort of sums it up, is as we get ready to develop our volunteers into high-performing volunteers, always remember They don't have any more time usually than we have ourselves, but they've got the heart. And when you got the heart and passion, you can make a difference, and you can make a huge difference for your organization. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video here on developing high-performing volunteers. If you have questions or comments, be sure to drop me a line or an email to info@thedailyebenezer.com. Hope you guys have a great day and have great success for your volunteers.